Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll begin in about 2 minutes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jordan, and I am the manager of online education programs at COSI. Thank you very much for joining me today for the 2020 COSI Science Festival. As you know, the festival has moved from a 4-day physical event to an all-digital format. During the festival, people can celebrate science by attending events just like this, ranging from mindfulness to learning how to identify minerals and gemstones. We're excited for all of these events. We hope you are too. Culminating on Saturday, May 9th, instead of coming together for the big science celebration, we hope you will connect virtually with us from home with your science experiments. So we want to see activities with you. So share us your photos and videos on social media using the hashtag COSI SciFest, and we hope to have those around all of our social media. So you can make a volcano, show us your COSI slime. We'd love to see all of your experiments on our social media using COSI SciFest. And of course, we want to give a big shout out to our sponsors for helping make this program possible, including our visionary sponsor, Battelle. We certainly could not have done this without them. And now it is my pleasure to welcome you all to our program today. We are with Axolotls in Action, and our presenter is M. Dominique Magistrato. I would like to now turn the program over to her. Thank you very much for joining us for the program today.
Hi guys, my name is Dom. I am really excited to be here with you guys today. I wish you could all see the guys that I'm going to show you today in person, but I'm really happy that I'm able to share them over Zoom at the very least. So like I said, my name is Dom. I am a PhD student at Ohio State. I don't actually study axolotls there. I'm in the entomology department, which means that I study bugs. But at the end of the day, I come home and I hang out with my axolotls here. So we have a couple things on the docket today. We have a couple different axolotls that I'm going to show you guys. We're going to start out with the smallest ones and eventually go on to the bigger ones and have the biggest one at the very end. So we're going to feed a couple of them, and yeah, if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to put them right here in the chat. I can actually see any questions that you guys post. I think I'm going to wait until the end, just in case a question that gets asked ends up being answered a little bit later on. But if by the end you have a question that hasn't been answered, I will definitely answer it. So with that said, I'm going to switch over to axolotls. All right, so here are the first two that we're going to be able to see today. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. If you can't, somebody just mention something in the chat. But so yeah, these are the first two I have to show you guys. You'll notice that they kind of look like tadpoles. So these are babies. They're not brand new babies. They are a couple months old. When they're at this life stage, they are called juvenile axolotls. So you might notice these fuzzy little things on the sides of their face. You can't see them too well, but if you look up pictures too, you can see them pretty well. But they kind of look like antlers or like fuzzy ears maybe. So what these are is actually gills. They're gills in the same way that you might think about gills for a fish, but they look a little bit different, and that's just because they're on the outside of the body. So what these do when the axolotls are swimming around doing their thing is they're pulling oxygen out of the water and circulating it around the body for the axolotl to use in the same way that you and I breathe air. So these guys actually already ate, so they're kind of sluggish right now, but we're gonna feed some more of them later. But you'll also notice that these guys look pretty different. So this one over here is pink, and this one is like dark and yellow and spotted. These are actually siblings, so they come from the same set of parents. So mom looked kind of like this guy, but she was solid black. And dad was actually like a golden yellow color. So in the same way that you and your siblings look different from each other and different from mom and dad, these guys are completely different. So axolotls have a couple different genes that actually code for different pigments, which cause different colors. So this guy right here is an albino axolotl. So they don't mind too bad when I touch him, but oh, there he goes. So he's kind of a bright pink, and he actually has no pigments at all. So that's what albino means. But this guy right here has 3 different kinds of pigments. He has xanthophores, melanophores, and iridophores. So xanthophores cause kind of this yellow color that we'll see here. The melanophores cause the darker spots, and the iridophores, this guy doesn't have too many, but it makes him kind of shiny. So, oh, I see somebody asked how old they are in the chat. So, I happened to see it just now. These guys are a couple months old. They're 5 months old, I think. Yeah, so I don't know if you could tell how long they are, but they're about 4 inches. When they're fully grown, they can get actually up to a foot long. So they get super, super big. And we can see these guys a little bit later on if we want, but I think we're actually going to switch over to another guy, which you may notice. So this guy is a little bit bigger than the other 2. I'm actually going to we're going to feed this guy. They're really, really fun to watch eat. I love watching them eat. It's one of my favorite parts of the day. Here we go. So that thing that I just dropped in there, it's going to take a second to melt, but as soon as it does, he's going to go ham on it. So this chunk right here is a chunk of frozen bloodworms. So these are just worms that are raised, and then you freeze them in little cubes, and it's a really, really good treat for the axolotls. They love it. All right, we'll give this a second to melt and actually we'll take a look at some of those questions. Okay, somebody said, do they grow larger or smaller based on their habitat? So some animals do that. I know goldfish do that. Axolotls do not do that. Axolotls will grow and grow and grow, and if you don't have them in a large enough enclosure, they will not be very happy. They will continue to grow. So they do grow big even if they're in a small container. We'll just let that know. So somebody said, can they survive on land? Actually, they cannot. So some salamanders you'll see are able to kind of swim around in the water and do their thing, and then also climb out and be on land when they want to. These guys cannot. They are fully aquatic and stay in the water for their entire lives, for the most part. So what colors can they be? We're actually going to get to that a little bit later when we see some of the other colors. Where do they? How long can they grow? They can grow up to 12 inches long. The biggest one I have is pretty big. He's like 9 inches long. This one is maybe 6 inches right now. Yeah, I'm gonna get to a lot of these questions later on. Awesome. I know this guy is hungry today. He just doesn't see the food yet. What do axolotls eat in their natural habitat? That's a great question. So in their natural habitat, they actually, I'll talk a little bit later about where they're found in the wild, but in their natural habitat, they'll eat anything from like small bugs that are found in the water to like little baby fish, really anything they can fit into their mouth. Axolotls actually don't have teeth. So when they eat something, it has to fit in their mouth, and it has to, if they can swallow it, then they can eat it. So, oh, he's gonna jump at it pretty soon. So axolotls are really, really not picky eaters. They'll eat, oh, there he goes. So you'll see he just grabs a big, huge chunk of them and kind of rips it off the rest, and he just swallows it. So it might look like he's chewing there, but he's just putting it into his mouth and he's swallowing it. So yeah, he'll go ahead and he will eat the rest of those. Let's see. All right. With that, we're going to move on. I heard somebody ask about the mom. So actually, we're going to see mom in just a second here. Okay. All right, I think you guys can see them. Okay. Actually, we're going to go ahead and put these right here. Okay. So for the ones that we just saw, the black one here is actually mom. Now it's kind of hard to tell the size difference. I wonder if we could get them in the same frame here. All right, so you can kind of see the size difference. So this one's like a teenager right here, but this one is mom. So the females don't get quite as large as males, but these ladies here are maybe 8 inches long. So now somebody else had asked about somebody else had asked about if they can live on land. So axolotls are actually what we call neotenic salamanders. So neotenic comes from the word neoteny, which means that these guys stay in their juvenile state for their entire lives. So a lot of salamanders they'll be in their like teenage juvenile state, and they'll live in the water. And then eventually they will, their legs will grow a little tougher, their gills will shrink, and they'll be able to breathe regular air. That doesn't happen with these guys. They live in the water for their entire life. So, do they fight? Somebody asked how old these guys are as well. So these ladies are about 2 years old. So they're full grown. Somebody also asked when they can reproduce. They can reproduce as soon as they are fully mature adults. That can happen as early as like 8 months old. So if you have a male and a female, you do have to be careful. Somebody also asked how many babies they can have. So in one egg laying session, an axolotl can actually have they can have a couple thousand eggs in one cycle. So when they reproduce, they have external fertilization of their eggs. So the females will lay just a ton of eggs. If you've ever seen frog eggs, like in a pond, they're kind of these little jelly bubble looking things with a black dot in the middle. That's exactly what axolotl eggs look like. And they'll be, so the females will lay the eggs and then the male will externally fertilize them. And if the eggs are fertilized, then they will develop and they will hatch into babies. We'll see if these guys are hungry today. The adults don't eat quite as often as the babies do. So yeah, the adults don't eat quite as often as the babies do. It's kind of like how teenagers just eat a bunch and a bunch and a bunch because they're growing so much and they're developing so quickly. Same thing with axolotls. So the juveniles will eat mostly every day, but the adults only eat maybe once a week. So somebody asked if the albino ones are more common than the other colors. So it's kind of a good mix. Actually, in the wild, axolotls do not look like this albino one here. They look more like this. So they're kind of a darker color, and they blend in with their surroundings a little bit more. So the albino ones are super common in the pets, but pet axolotls are kind of separate from the wild population, and they've been bred to have all different sorts of colors and stuff, and that kind of thing. So somebody else asked how many years they can live up to. So they can live up to 10 years old, which is pretty old, but pretty awesome, I think. So what part of the world do they live in? So axolotls are actually only found in the wild in one part of the world, which is in a valley in Mexico. Oh, see, that one just had her lunch. She's eaten. But they're actually only found in one part of the world, in a valley in Mexico. There are two lakes that I have a lot of trouble pronouncing, but these two lakes are the only two places in the world where axolotls are found in the wild. Actually, they are in the wild. They're playing. In the wild, they are critically endangered, which is unfortunate. So that kind of happened because there were some issues with invasive fish species being released into the lakes that the axolotls come from, and the fish would compete with the axolotls for food. They would eat a lot of the axolotl babies, that kind of thing. So, oh, somebody asked if they're social animals or if they prefer to be alone. That's a great question. So when they are juveniles, I have them in the same, so the two that I showed you guys earlier were in the same container, but that's only temporary for feeding purposes. Juveniles, if you leave them together for too long, will actually cannibalize each other because they can't really tell the difference between their siblings and food sometimes. So I'll give them their food separately in the same container, and make sure that they're nice and full, and then they can kind of hang out together for a bit. But the adults are fine being together. So these girls actually, they hang out and they have a little rock that they share in my tank. So this isn't where I keep them all the time. They are normally in a big 40-gallon tank with lots of plants and rocks and that kind of thing. So they do not mate for life. Somebody else asked that question as well. No, some animals do, they do not. Someone else asked if they have good eyesight. Their eyesight is decent, but not great. They go a lot by smell, actually. The babies, when they're little tiny, can actually only smell food. They can't see anything, so they eat brine shrimp when they're little, but they get to those by smell. Julia asked what the babies look like. So the babies, when they're brand new, when they're super tiny, they actually look just like tadpoles, which is really cool. If you've ever gone out in your backyard, if you have a pond and seen the tadpoles that'll eventually turn into frogs, they look a lot like tadpoles. So if you picture like one of these guys, but super, super small and with no legs or arms. They kind of just wiggle around and use their back tail to swim. It's very, very cute. Tyler asked if they have names. So these two are, so the dark one is Charlie Brown and the lighter one is Charlie White, even though they're girls, but that's what we decided to call them. Okay, I think we can actually move on to, also there are a lot of questions coming in. I promise I will scroll up and look at all of them at the end. Okay, so this here is Dexter. He's also normally kept, all of these guys are normally kept in their own tanks, but I have them in bins right now just so you guys can see them a little bit more clearly. We're actually going to feed Dexter an earthworm today. So that is his favorite treat in the entire world. He loves earthworms. So I try to have an earthworm for him every couple weeks. He enjoys it. We'll see how hungry he is today. But let me just grab that. So Dexter was named because, we'll see if he'll eat. So Dexter, I don't know if any of you guys know this, but Dexter is derived from the Latin word dextra, which means right, as in right-handed. So when Dexter was a baby, before I got him, he was kept with some other of his siblings. And one of his siblings, who was a little bit bigger than him, actually bit Dexter's left arm off. So his entire left arm was gone here for quite a long time. So he was purely right-handed when I got him. But axolotls are actually really, really amazing because they are probably the best animal in the entire world at regenerating their limbs and also other parts of their body. So Dexter, his entire right arm was gone, but he grew it back. It took him a while, it took him a couple of months, but he grew it back like there was nothing wrong. You can't even tell that it used to be gone. So axolotls, like I said, they are very, very, very good at regenerating both their limbs, and they can also regenerate their hearts. They can regenerate their brains, which is really, really cool. Oh, he's going after that worm. You might see it. You might smell it. We'll see. Oh. Oh, he'll get there. Oh, he's not sure. But yeah, so because axolotls are so good at regenerating, people do a lot of research looking into their genetics. So a lot of research labs in the world are trying to figure out what exactly makes them so good at regenerating. Because if we could figure out what that is and maybe try and use it for in some kind of medical context, that would be awesome. So why does he like, so I'm going to read some of your guys' questions now. How old is Dexter? Dexter is almost 3 years old, actually. His birthday is in June. So he'll be 3 very soon. They look sort of like mud skippers. Are they somehow related? They are related to mud skippers. I think somebody else asked about something else. Oh, are they related to the hellbender? Yeah, they're hellbenders and mud skippers are both salamanders that are very closely related to axolotls. All right. Oh, Amelia asks what their favorite food is. And I think someone else asked, I'm sorry, I can't remember, I can't find it in the chat, but why Dexter is eating something different. So Dexter and Charlie Brown and Charlie White actually all eat bloodworms on a regular basis. Bloodworms are really, really good for them. So earthworms are pretty nutritious too, but it's just something different. So I like to mix it up with them. But Charlie Brown and Charlie White also get earthworms as a treat on a regular basis. Aisha asks if they are good pets. I think they are excellent pets. You just have to know how to take care of them and do your research first. So there are a couple key things about keeping axolotls as pets that I'll share with you guys right now. So one fact is that if you keep them, when you keep them in a tank, they cannot be kept with gravel. So remember how I told you guys that axolotls kind of just eat whatever can fit in their mouth and try and swallow? So if they swallow a small piece of gravel, it can get stuck in their intestines, and that's not too good for them, and they have to end up going to the vet. So you keep an axolotl, only keep sand in the tank, no gravel. So Jackson asks how long it takes for the parts to grow back. So that depends on which parts are missing in the first place. So if it's like a toe, it really won't take that long. If it's like, if they're regenerating their brains, which they can do, it's going to take a lot longer. So anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months. Oh, Dexter might not be hungry yet. Let's see. Augie asks if they have bones. They do have bones. They do have bones. So they have, yeah, they have bones and they have cartilage as well. But they have a nice little skeleton in there. Somebody asked, do they drink? They do drink, yes, they need water, just like you and I, and they live in water, so it's pretty easy for them to get them. Tyler asks, can they hurt you? So I've never had one hurt me, no. I've had them, so Dexter will sometimes, if I'm giving him an earthworm, they'll have to put my hand kind of far into his tank, like he'll nip one of my fingers sometimes and it doesn't hurt at all. It's actually kind of funny, it's very cute. Ruby asks, why won't Dexter eat the worm? I don't know why he won't eat the worm. They're normally his favorite. But actually we can see maybe Charlie Brown or Charlie White will eat a worm today. Let's see. I really like watching them eat the worms. My favorite thing. See if one of them will go for it. They're also in kind of a weird environment right now. They're used to being in their tanks and they're in kind of these weird plastic bins right now. So that could be part of the reason. Jennifer asks, do they have teeth? So they don't have teeth. So they actually don't chew any of their food. So when they're eating those worms, they're just fitting as much as they can into their mouth and then swallowing it. And then their stomach and digestive tract does all the work. Lauren asks, do they breathe? So they do breathe, just not in the same way as you or I. So they don't like swim up to the surface and like gulp air. They don't do that. They use those gills that we talked about a little bit earlier. So the gills, so they breathe in kind of the same way as a fish would.
I can help moderate some questions here for you as well. Earlier
Sure, thanks, Robin.
we had Kate ask, are they intelligent?
So I guess that's kind of a subjective question, Kate. I wouldn't call them, they're not very, very smart, even in the way that a dog or a cat might be smart. I would say they're about the same smartness level as a fish, maybe. So they don't really know, so they wouldn't be able to recognize me compared to somebody else, for example. Really, they can only tell when food's in there or when another, oh, there goes Charlie White. Charlie White was hungry today. But they're not very intelligent, Kate, no. About the same level as a fish, maybe.
Joanna wants to know how big they can grow.
So Joanna, they can grow, so Dexter we saw was maybe 9 inches long. They can grow up to a foot long. So it really depends on the axolotl, but they can get very, very big.
Lucas wants to know if they are omnivores.
They are omnivores. Lucas, they are not omnivores. They are actually carnivores. So they eat, so when they're in captivity, they eat worms, different kinds of worms, the bloodworms, the earthworms, and in the wild, they only eat like baby fish or little bugs or little larvae that are in the water.
So you mentioned that they can regenerate their limbs. Lily wants to know if they lose their tails like some other lizards might purposely do that.
Oh, that's a really good question. They don't do that, no. So they won't purposely like lose their tail if a predator were to come up and bite it. But if a predator were to come and just bite its tail off by itself, the axolotl would be able to regenerate the tail. But as far as I know, they don't purposely do that in the way that lizards do.
Kaylin asks if they only live in freshwater or if they can live in saltwater too.
That's a good question, Kaylin. They only live in freshwater.
Amy asked about the fins on the side of their head. Maybe you could talk about those again.
Sure. Yeah, they kind of do look like fins, don't they? Yeah, they're it's really hard to tell at first what they are, but those are the gills that I was talking a little bit about earlier. So yeah, these three things that kind of stick out on either side, they're red on Charlie White here and they're black on Charlie Brown. But those are the gills. So they look nothing like fish gills, which we know. But what those are doing is pulling oxygen out of the water, and the axolotl basically uses them to breathe.
Chance asked what it's called, and maybe if you spell it for them, it will be helpful for them to understand the word that you're saying.
Sure, Chance. Yeah, it's kind of hard to pronounce, but they're called axolotls. So that's spelled Axolotl.
Aisha asked if they have tongues.
Oh, that's a good question. They do not have tongues, no.
And Bethany asks how many eggs do they lay?
So Bethany, they lay a ton of eggs. It does depend on the individual, but they can lay thousands at a time. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Not all of them will hatch usually, but they lay quite a lot. A couple hundred to multiple thousand in one laying. So across their lifetime, if one were to lay eggs multiple times, it would be thousands of eggs. Pretty crazy.
Jessica asked if they are warm-blooded.
Jessica, they are. Did you ask if they're warm-blooded?
Yes, if they're warm-blooded.
They are not warm-blooded. They're cold-blooded.
So another Jessica asked if they are lazy.
If they're lazy, Jessica, I guess I don't think I would call them lazy. So they move around when they want to eat and when they're hanging out with each other. But even Dexter, when he's by himself in his tank, he'll just swim around because he feels like it, because it's fun. So yeah, I wouldn't call them lazy. Dexter's pretty active when he's even by himself. And a lot of the other ones just like to swim around for fun. So they're pretty active. Not all the time, but when they want to be.
And Laura asked if they have a sense of smell.
Laura, they do have a sense of smell. When they're super young, that's actually the main way that they find their food is by smell. So.
And then Mina also asked if they have ears.
If they have ears, they, I, I'm pretty sure they don't have ears. They might be, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna have to look that one up later. I'm pretty sure they don't, but I'll have to double check. As far as I can remember, they do not have ears.
And Pammy wants to know if they sleep.
If they sleep, do axolotls sleep? So not in the same way that you or I would sleep. That's a really good question. So they don't have states where they are like not conscious and not sleeping. So they don't close their eyes. They do kind of, they enter these stages where they're not doing as much and they're not as metabolically active, but it's not the same way that you or I would sleep.
Well, we are over on time. Thank you very much for joining us. Do you have any final thoughts, Dom, before we conclude the program today?
Well, no, it was really, really awesome to share all of this with you guys. I'm really happy that I had this opportunity today. If you guys want to know more, there are a ton of resources out there. Axolotls are absolutely incredible. And yeah, really, thanks for coming.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Dom, for presenting the program for us. We've really enjoyed it, and we had a lot of great questions from our audience today. So thank you all for those great questions.
Yeah,
There's lots
thanks,
of other
guys.
programs happening with the COSI Science Festival. So I know we have another program coming up in about 25 minutes. And that one, we are going to be looking at snails and having them race across a platform. And we're going to be trying to use math and probability to figure out which one is going to win. So that should be a really fun program that will be up next. And we hope we can see all of you there. Thank you very much for joining us today, and have a great day.